Well, what'd you know? Science reveals the creationists aren't stupid, and we dive into a mailbag that's bursting at the seams. This is Genesis Week. And welcome to this episode of Genesis Week, the weekly program of creationary commentary on news, views, and events pertaining to the Origins controversy, brought to you by the supporters of Core Ottawa, Citizens for Origins Research and Education. Excellence in pirate broadcasting. We set up the studio in an old boxcar so we could continue to bring you the information the anti-creationists don't want you to see or hear, and we give the glory to our creator as we broadcast right across Canada on the Miracle Channel, all over the US on the Walk Television, and of course, the Christianity Network on YouTube. Remember, if you get lost in cyberspace, you can just punch in Wazooloo.com, that's me, or GenesisWeek.com, that's the show, and you can find us, subscribe to our YouTube channel, and get extras like Crevo rants and full interviews with our guests. I'm your host, Ian Juby. I had a number of friends and enemies send me a study just published in the American Sociological Review revealing the connection between science and religion in the United States. The anti-creationists took a bit of a hit with this study, as many anti-creationists like to portray any Darwin doubters as ignorant rednecks. Now, I wish I had $1 for every anti-creationist who parroted comments like, "Hey, if scientists didn't believe evolution, we wouldn't have computers, cell phones, and airplanes." What? Did you flunk your intelligence test? What does evolution have to do with a computer? Absolutely nothing. The computer has a creator and was intelligently designed. What does evolution have to do with a cell phone? Absolutely nothing. It too had a creator and was intelligently designed. What does evolution have to do with airplanes? Absolutely nothing, because airplanes had a creator and were intelligently designed. And the creator's belief in creation or evolution had nothing to do with their engineering now, did it? When I say I question evolution, those who have flunked their IQ test often respond with, what are you gonna question gravity next? Oh, good grief. Gravity is observable, measurable, testable. We can repeat the results. We can predict the results. Evolution is none of these things. Molecules to man evolution cannot be tested, has never been observed. Molecules to man evolution is certainly not repeatable. It has failed to fulfill its predictions. Molecules to man evolution is not science, because scientific things are observable, testable, repeatable, predictable, and measurable. Evolution is a religious belief system. Why? Because it is outside the bounds of science. It doesn't mean it's wrong, it just means it's not science. It's not technology. It is not even close to being on the same playing field as, say, gravity, nuclear physics, or chemistry. Unfortunately, the error of equating evolution with science became apparent in both this original study and in the news reports about it. The study compared almost 3,000 respondents and grouped those respondents into 3 categories. Traditional, which meant they preferred religion over science. Moderns, who preferred science over religion. And post-seculars, who preferred science and religion equally. While the moderns and post-seculars had about equivalent education and scientific knowledge, the post-seculars most consistently rejected human evolution and the Big Bang. To the surprise of the anti-theists, the post-seculars had a very positive view of science and demonstrated it with their high scientific knowledge, on par with the moderns. In an interview with Live Science, co-author Timothy O'Brien said, "The difference between the post-secular and the modern group is not a matter of a knowledge deficit," O'Brien said. "The post-secular people understand genetics and experimental methods and statistics," he said. Many of the post-secular people say they support science, but see evolution and the Big Bang Theory as corrupted science, O'Brien said. Actually, let's take it a step farther, Mr. O'Brien. You made the error of equating evolution and the Big Bang as science. Both evolution and the Big Bang are outside of the scientific realm. It's perfectly acceptable for scientists to believe those things if they want, but these beliefs are not science. They fall outside the realm of the scientific, as they are not observable, repeatable, predictable, and just because a scientist believes something does not mean he is right. Take, for example, just this past week, I was flooded by you intrepid viewers who called my attention to a leaked report regarding the Bicep 2 findings of last year. If you'll recall, there was a media frenzy with lots of you viewers asking me to touch on the findings of the Bicep 2 research team using a special telescope at the South Pole. The team claimed to have found echoes of the Big Bang in the form of polarization in the cosmic background radiation, and thus alleged proof of the Big Bang. The report was heralded as having the potential of being the discovery of the century, and quickly inspired talk of a Nobel Prize. Now the entire discovery is being recanted. Space dust is to blame for the polarization they measured, and it has nothing to do with any Big Bang or lack thereof. Just because a whole mess of scientists believe something does not make it true or correct. This is especially true when those scientists venture out into areas that are outside of the scientific realm, beyond the observable, testable, repeatable, and predictable. The poll results show that Darwin doubters are anything but uneducated lackeys, and in fact exposes the misunderstanding that most scientists have of what is science and what is not. It exposes that the educated and well-informed Darwin doubters actually recognize the limits of science and how evolution in particular has ventured outside the bounds of science. Just wanted to give a shout out to one of my favorite long-standing creation ministries. Many of you will already be familiar with Creation Moments and the radio program by our own Canuck, Ian Taylor. Creation Moments airs on a ridiculous number of radio stations all over the world. They've also now hired on Darren Marlar and added a shorter version of Creation Moments called Creation Moments Minute. 1-minute segments that are short, fast, and excellent. Now, Darren is working hard to produce them in video form as well, so you can access them from YouTube. I just highly recommend them as a continuous, short and fascinating resource that's just bound to get you thinking. You can visit Darren's YouTube channel here. He's also a Christian comedian, and you can catch his weekly dose of weird news, among other things. And you can also catch the Creation Moments Minute on YouTube here. Coming up soon enough is February 12th. What's February 12th? Darwin's birthday. And in honor of Darwin's birthday, the annual Question Evolution Day. This is the day where we conduct good science and combat anti-science by asking questions, by questioning evolution and the evidence that is alleged to support it. Now, there are loads of resources on the Question Evolution Project's webpage of which you can make use. We just encourage you to participate in any way you can. Do you have a blog? Make a blog post of a question or several questions for evolution. Have a YouTube channel? Make a video and post it on that day in honor of the occasion. Have a web page or newsletter? Post a question there. Perhaps write a letter to the editor of your local newspaper. Emphasize how it is proper science to question everything, especially evolution. Bring up your favorite evidence refuting evolution and supporting creation. If you post something, please send us a link to us at comments@genesisweek.com. We'd like to see what you guys are up to. We'll be back in 1 minute with a mailbag that's bursting at the seams. Oh, not again! To the horror of both fans and enemies, Ian Juby is back with more ranting goodness. Okay, Jacques, you first. Just when you thought his meds had kicked in, Ian goes off on a tangent about what killed the dinosaurs, the origin of life, defining evolution, and yes, even sex. It wasn't enough for an R rating, but nowadays, what is? Volume 4 of his ever-popular and ever-hated Crevo Rants has 8 new short, fast, funny, and hard-hitting episodes. You can get your copy on the soon-to-be-extinct DVD for $15 plus shipping and handling, or purchase the instant digital download of all 8 tracks for just $8. Or you can buy all 4 volumes of his world-infamous rants for the price of 3. Order your copies today and have a party with, like, popcorn and stuff. Visit Ian's bookstore today. Mail for me? Ah! Yep, that's the one. East Vietnamese jumping spider. The venom is so strong that one bite can kill any child and 95% of adults. The surviving 5% typically slip into a coma for 3 to 6 months, only to wake up with permanent paralysis. In response to the Infatuation with Mars episode, Robert Little wrote in on our Facebook page. I don't see any denial of God in searching for life outside of Earth. Why do you insist otherwise? Are you aware that most Americans that accept evolutionary theory also believe in God? Thanks for writing in, Robert. I agree that to many, searching for life outside of Earth is not a denial of God. I was specifically referring to those who make the absurd denial that there is a creator, the author of life, while simultaneously and hypocritically grasping any straws that suggest life elsewhere in our universe. They do this in hopes of explaining life here on Earth, perhaps coming from that extraterrestrial life. Why? Because that extraterrestrial life is not a supreme being. That's why. I'm also well aware that the majority of Americans who accept evolutionary theory also believe in God. They typically believe that God used evolution and are known as theistic evolutionists. Now, while I am aware of this, I would respectfully ask a number of questions to such believers. Who is that God? How do you know he is God? Do you believe in Jesus Christ? If so, Jesus was a young earth creationist. Just read the words he said recorded in the Gospels. Are you going to believe the words of fallible men, scientists who they themselves will tell you that their theories can be discredited on a moment's notice? Or are you going to believe the one who rose from the dead? Evolution uses death and disease, for example, mutations, to progress life. Yet our Creator healed the sick, showing he doesn't like sickness either, and called death an enemy. Evolution is a sick and twisted process of torture to life. If you think God used evolution, then that is not a God I want to follow, with all due respect. I realize this is not something that the majority of theistic evolutionists have thought of, so I say this pointedly, but with understanding and grace towards those of you who have believed it. Now, my Bible also says that God created the stars in the heavens for signs, seasons, and times, not home to E.T. Again, not something that most would have thought of until provoked, like I was, to seek the answer. Now, I go into a lot of more details, both scientifically and theologically, in Genesis and Aliens, which you can get on DVD or as an instant digital download. Peter emailed us. Hello, I've seen your show many times. It's interesting how you explain science so that's understandable. I'm hoping you might find time to explain something I can't. Noah's Ark. Here's my dilemma. There are somewhere in the neighborhood of 10 million species on the planet. That's a big boat. Let's say we only allot species 1 square foot, so 2 times 10 million square feet, or a boat of 20 million square feet. Of course, we both realize that is not a reasonable allotment, yet let's keep the math simple, please. So let's make the boat 500 feet wide, and therefore we divide 500 into 20 million. So that yields a boat 500 feet wide and 7.58 miles long. Wow, that's a big boat. Sorry, I can't remember how many cubits the actual ark was, but I know it wasn't 7.58 miles long. Up to this point, we've made no allowance for all the food and all the various species that could easily double the square feet of ship required. Now we're approaching 15 miles long. These days, a ship 1,000 feet long is a major accomplishment. How do you think they accomplished this huge task? God bless Peter. Well, thanks for writing in, Peter. This is a common question, and I'm so glad you asked. First of all, what does the Bible say? Using present-day measurements, the Ark of Noah was probably 450 feet long, 80 feet wide, and 50 feet high. As for the number of species, well, let's examine that for a minute. In 2011, there was a PLOS biology paper that came out with an official estimate of the number of species on Earth. They estimated 8.7 million species, an estimate which included all species which had not yet been discovered and documented. So it was an exhaustive study to say the least. Now also, that number does need to be taken with a grain of salt. Bear in mind that there is an alleged estimated 1,200 species of fruit flies just in the Hawaiian Islands alone. Now, do you really think there's 1,200 different species of fruit flies in the Hawaiian Islands? Well, of course not. Such ridiculous numbers are achieved because of an extremely vague definition of species. Nevertheless, we will use that inflated estimate of 8.7 million species for the discussion at hand. So of the estimated 8.7 million species worldwide, roughly a quarter of them, 2.2 million, are marine organisms. Now, obviously, marine organisms are going to fare just fine in a worldwide flood. Noah was told only to bring land critters on the ark, and with good reason. There's no reason to bring a fish or a whale on board the ark. Of the remaining 6.5 million species, 5.2 million are insects. Now, the vast majority of insects do not need to be taken on the ark. They will survive a global flood just fine, either living in the water or on floating log mats composed of trees uprooted during the flood. In fact, this probably plays a role in why we find so much amber containing insects in the fossil record. Smashed and broken trees all over the world during one catastrophic event ooze out lots and lots of tree sap, which traps insects trying to ride out the flood on these floating log mats. The sap encasing these insects gets buried, becoming amber. The insect man, Carl Priest, had much to say on the subject of insects taken on the ark. Now, even if you did bring insects, insects don't exactly take up a lot of space. Have you ever seen an ant farm? How much space does Noah need to bring thousands upon thousands of insects? Not a whole lot. Furthermore, most insects would not need to be taken on the ark. They would survive Noah's flood quite well, either just in the water itself or on floating logs and vegetation mats. As Priest points out, there are loads of insects which can even breathe underwater. Now, all things considered, we probably have to account for some 1.2 million present-day species. Now, of those species, both evolutionists and creationists would say they all arose from a smaller number of animals which diversified. For example, horses, zebras, and all donkeys all most likely arose from one pair of horse-like animal. The wolves, coyotes, foxes, dogs, etc. probably all arose from one pair of a dog-like animal. So taking into account even extinct fossil animals, John Wood Morphy, in his classic book, Noah's Ark, A Feasibility Study, estimated there was probably some 16,000 animals on board the ark. So just how much space would that take up? Noah would have brought juveniles on board the ark for a multitude of reasons. They're smaller. They don't don't eat or drink much. They sleep lots. They don't go to the bathroom much. That's important. And when they get off the ark, they have a full reproductive lifespan ahead of them. So even large animals like the elephants or large dinosaurs would be represented on the ark by juveniles, perhaps the size of a sheep, even though the majority of dinosaurs are actually quite small. Nevertheless, even taking adult sizes into account, let us consider the average size of all of those animals. The majority are very small, such as mice, rats, hedgehogs, dogs, etc. The average size works out to about that of a sheep. So essentially you have to find space for about 16,000 sheep. Now, keeping all of the animals in cages averaging 20 by 20 by 12 inches, or 50 by 50 by 30 centimeters, 16,000 animals would occupy about 42,000 cubic feet in a ship with some 1.5 million cubic feet. That's 1,200 square meters of animals in a ship which has a capacity of 43,500 square meters. So obviously, there's plenty of room, even if you up that number to 1 million animals. Now, there's also way more to this subject relating to food requirements, getting rid of waste, etc., which all has surprising answers, but I hope this helps you for now, Peter. Krabby Lobster wrote in on YouTube. Hi, I have a question. I've recently come across something called insertion mutations. These mutations do add new information to the DNA, but only in base pairs. To me, they don't really amount to anything, but they sort of a bit scary to me since they do add new information. Can you maybe do a video on this in the future, why this wouldn't prove evolution? Thanks for writing in. Let's first of all examine what he's talking about. Now in DNA, you have a program written with 4 letters, which determines how to make you, or a plant, or an animal, etc. This series of letters in humans is some 3.2 billion letters long. Now sometimes a copying error occurs and an extra letter is added in. This is an insertion mutation. A mutation is simply a change in the DNA, and in this case the change was the insertion of an extra letter. Now mutations can be accidental, caused by radiation for example, which deletes or removes some letters. Or mutations can be programmed. In other words, the organism somehow changes its own DNA. Now, in humans, insertion mutations are almost always a very bad thing. There are very complex systems running around in your body, specifically looking for errors in your DNA and fixing them. Why? Because errors in your DNA kill you. Most of the errors have minimal effect, but if you get lots and lots of them, the accumulative effect is deadly. I go into this in more detail in Crevo Rant number 78, The Boat That Don't Float. Almost always, the anti-creationists will bring up insertion mutations in bacteria, a completely different ballgame than mutations in humans, animals, and plants. But let's take a look at an example of an insertion mutation to understand its effects first. Let's take an entry out of a telephone book. We find the line for Martin McBride, 281-5555. A copying error inserts one letter, and the result is even still readable in the English language. Martina McBride, 281-5555. Did that error actually produce an increase of information? Now stop and think about it. No, it did not. In fact, it was a complete loss of all of the information in that line. Why? Because it's now the wrong information. There is no Martina McBride at that telephone number. If we were talking about living systems, and your life depended on one system in the cell communicating with another system, but it had the wrong telephone number, you'd be dead. Now, there is cases with bacteria, however, where the bacteria reprogrammed their own DNA to survive certain situations. For example, some bacteria altered their DNA in order to be able to eat nylon in a wastewater tank at a nylon factory. Now, bacteria are not like humans at all. They can swap DNA just by touching each other. They can reprogram their own DNA. It's a smart little critter, but it's using intelligence to modify its own DNA. It does this at the expense of other systems in the bacteria. typically reproductive or energy systems. So the moment it's taken out of the harsh environment and placed into a regular environment, it reverts back to the way it was. It undoes the changes it made. Why? Because those changes were detrimental and were only allowing it to survive the current harsh conditions. Notice also this is not a gain of information. It borrowed the information from elsewhere within the bacteria. There is no new information presented here. So I would put the challenge back to the anti-creationists. Find me an example of an insertion mutation that is an example of new information. Now there's way more to this. I go into this in detail in Crevo Rant number 80. Nylonase is not new information. I hope that helps, Crabby Lobster. Boy, I have a hard time saying that with a straight face. Farron also wrote in a highly provocative comment on Facebook. I think it is high time we chuck this ancient text that is ruining people's minds. Religious people are living their entire lives and raising their kids based upon a bunch of idiotic fairy tales. Their text is full of magical nonsense, contradictions, and racism, and justifies genocide. If science proves them wrong, they just change their interpretation of it. They become dogmatic, imposing, proselytizing babblers because of its foolishness. They say it predicts real events, but then you check into it, and it's always wrong or hopelessly vague. They say he taught us about life, but no one can agree on what he actually said was true. His ideas are simply copied from others before him. His disciples simply lied, and this is proven. He's dead, and he can't save anyone. Of course, I'm talking about the ancient text and religion of Darwin's Origin of the Species and Theory of Evolution. Thanks to everyone who wrote in. I gotta call this a wrap. I'm your host, Ian Juby. I hope you'll join me again next Genesis Week. Remember, you can send in your comments, questions, hate mail, and fresh lobster to us in a number of ways. You can email us at comments@genesisweek.com, or you can send us a tweet at GenesisWeek. Or you can go to genesisweek.com, which takes you to our YouTube channel, find the most recent show, and post a comment there. Or you can head on over to our Facebook page at facebook.com/GenesisWeekTV. Remember those words of comfort and warning from our Creator, the Lord Jesus Christ, who said, I am the way, the truth, and the life. No man comes to the Father except through me. We'll see you on the flip side.
We are a viewer-supported program and need your support to keep this program on the air. Please pray for us, and if you wish to financially support the program, Canadians can make a tax-deductible donation to Core Ottawa, Canada North Post Office Box 72075, Ottawa, Ontario, K2K 2P4. While we cannot offer tax-deductible receipts outside of Canada, donors wishing to financially support the program can do so online at ianjuby.org/donations, and thank you for your support.